Kenjaku versus Hakari is one of those matchups that people want to see mostly because of how cool the fight would be. Kenjaku is a sorcerer who has been around for thousands of years, and he has gained Suguru Geto's body, who was a special grade. And Hakari is a sorcerer who was expelled from the Jujutsu High School, but he has still made a name for himself by having crazy statements said about him and performing crazy feats of strength. Kenjaku uses curse spirit manipulation and gravity as his two main forms of fighting, and Hakari just basically gambles in order to hit a jackpot and then beat you down from there. For each of these versus battles I do on the channel, I run polls asking who you guys think wins and we talk about it. But for the poll on this matchup, this was very one-sided, where Kenjaku won about 82% of the votes. But how would a fight between the two actually go? Do they both have abilities that would allow for a fight on even ground, or do one of the fighters have a couple things that just outright counter the other? Let's get into it, but before we do, I want to say if you enjoy JJK content, then I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as I do post every couple of days on different topics you guys give me and I feel come up with on my own. Now let's get into the video. So the first person we should cover is Hakari and his fighting style. We know Hakari is an up-close brawler type of fighter. He doesn't have any ranged techniques and prefers to get into the face of an opponent. There are 3 fights that Hakari has, one against Yuji, then Charles, but the most important fight and the one we'll be using to tell how strong Hakari actually is when he fought the strongest opponent he had fought so far, being Kashimo. Now going into this fight, Hakari had already hit the jackpot prior, and we know that when he's in his jackpot state, for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, he has automatic reverse curse technique and an unlimited amount of curse energy to use. The automatic reverse curse technique just heals him while he's taking damage, so he doesn't have to worry about focusing on using reverse curse technique to heal, because his body just basically does it for him. Now we see how broken this ability actually is when Kashimo goes to pile on attacks for the first time. He kicks Hakari in the head, then punches him in the face, and he's even wondering why Hakari isn't fighting back. Kashimo says what's going on, he suddenly lost the will to fight. But Hakari just plops right back up and punches Kashimo in the face, then runs towards him and kicks him in the stomach. So we know that Hakari doesn't worry when somebody's piling on attacks because he knows that his body would just handle it for him and then he can keep attacking right after. Which is the reoccurring theme in this fight. You know, Hakari keeps taking a lot of damage, but his body just keeps helping him out. And we even see this for the first time when Hakari takes a huge blow to his arm when Kashimo just knocks it right off. Now Kashimo expects that he can just run in and begin attacking Hakari because, you know, Hakari did just lose an arm. But Hakari doesn't care, he just kicks Kashimo anyways and his arm just regenerates on its own. So we know that even when he's taking a huge blow, something as massive as losing an entire limb, Hakari will continue to push forward and fight. Now we know that reverse curse technique does come from the head, so if you just take Hakari's head out, then you're fine. Whether you just blow it up, cut his head off or whatever, as long as you take his head out, then he'll just die. Because even though they say Hakari is effectively immortal, Kashimo realizes this, and it's just said throughout the series that since reverse curse technique comes from the head, if you just remove the head or blow the head up or damage it to a certain point, the reverse curse technique just won't flow. Which Kashimo even echoes this when he begins to hit Hakari in the head. He says curse energy comes from the stomach, but reverse curse technique operates from the head. No matter how powerful the reverse curse technique is, a single blow to the head can kill. So I will pinpoint my lightning and make it explode in his head. Now we do know that Hakari survives this by ejecting the curse energy that Kashimo puts in his head, but it's just further reinforcement that if you do hit him hard enough in the head, he will just die. Now there comes a time when Kashimo redirects lightning that he saved up in another place on the field, and it comes and hits Hakari in his side right as Hakari's round ends, and it puts a hole right in Hakari's stomach. But even after taking this excruciating blow, Hakari is still able to open his domain. Now somehow, even after taking this blow and opening his domain, Kashimo thinks that Hakari should only have a 1 in 239 chance of landing a jackpot, but Hakari had a hidden probability and actually hits the jackpot and saves his life. And this is where Kashimo says, "Hakari Kenji, you're truly overwhelmingly lucky." So we do know that Hakari just is lucky, that is within his character, that even when he's looking down in a fight and looks like he's about to die, as long as he gets his domain expansion off, he's probably going to hit a jackpot. Now, we do know that Hakari is just a physical fighter. He doesn't have curse techniques that he throws at an opponent. But when it comes to physicals, Hakari is extremely strong. We see plenty of times throughout the fight with Kashimo that they're able to go back and forth with each other and land good blows on each other. Although I will say Kashimo does get the better of him more times than Hakari gets the better of Kashimo, which is just even shown by the fact that Kashimo basically lands 3 lethal attacks. The one to his arm, the one to Hakari's side, and then the one to Hakari's head. But in all 3 of those situations, Hakari's reverse curse technique saved him, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It is good that Hakari has that reverse curse technique there to save him. But in terms of physical stats and combat, it does seem like Kashimo has a slight edge. But that's not to take anything away from Hakari, as he still is up there in terms of strength. They definitely are in the same bracket of strength, which means we can look at this statement that is probably the most debated about statement in Jujutsu Kaisen, and it's where Yuta says that Hakari is stronger than him. The way the statement goes is Yuta says, "Just seek out Kenji Hakari," and when they ask who Hakari is, Yuta says, "He's moody, but when he gets worked up, he's stronger than I am." Now Maki says that's not true. I'm just going to tell you right now, this statement doesn't matter. Whether Hakari is stronger or weaker than Yuta, he's going to lose to Kenjaku anyways. The best that gets Hakari is special grade level, but Kenjaku can be special grades anyway. Now that's not to say that all special grades are equal, but I'm going to get into why Kenjaku beats Hakari up badly, and it'll just become apparent why this statement about Yuta being weaker or stronger than Hakari just wouldn't matter because of how Hakari fights and how Kenjaku just basically counters him. So with that being said, let's get into the Kenjaku part of the video, Kenjaku's fighting style, and why ultimately he slams Hakari. The most important things for Kenjaku come within his fight with Yuki, so let's just take a look at that fight and see what we can use to get a gauge of how strong Kenjaku is. So we know that when Kenjaku fights Yuki, he actually gets hit because he didn't know what Yuki's ability was. You can see that he tries to think about what Yuki can do. He says, since they gave her the title special grade, the administration should have information on her curse technique. But despite that, I haven't been able to get it from them. So he decides to summon a special grade curse and keep at a distance to see what Yuki can do. But Yuki runs up on him, punches him and breaks his arms, and says that her curse technique is mass. And I do want to say that after this, Kenjaku basically doesn't get hit for the rest of the fight. He does maybe get hit once or twice, but every other punch or kick thrown or any other attack was either blocked, reacted to, or dodged throughout the entire fight after this. It just goes to show that the only reason Kenjaku got hit here by Yuki is because he didn't know what he was dealing with, so he let her get in close. Also, Yuki is just a direct counter to Kenjaku, which is why he opens up a domain expansion. We see Kenjaku say that their curse techniques aren't suited for fighting, and then he just opens his domain expansion. This is because Yuki's mask can just destroy any cursed spirit he summons because, as Kenjaku says, her curse technique ignores everything inside and out, so every cursed spirit he summons would just get blown up. So I do want to say, not only would Kenjaku have everything he has in his fight with Yuki against Hakari, but he would still also have his special grade cursed spirits because Kenjaku wouldn't come across the same problem with Hakari. Hakari doesn't have punches with infinite mass that ignore anything inside and out. Hakari just throws punches that Kashimo is just able to take. Now that's not to say that Hakari can't beat one of the special grade curses that Kenjaku summons. It's just that he definitely wouldn't be able to do it in one punch, and if he decided to dedicate too much time to a cursed spirit, he would leave himself open to other attacks from Kenjaku. And before I get into the domain activities that would happen in this fight, I just do want to cover one more ability of Kenjaku's that is important when it comes to physical fighting, but it's also a sure hit in his domain expansion, and that is his gravity technique. There comes a time in the fight when Choso comes back in and they're trying to jump Kenjaku while his curse technique is down, because remember Kenjaku did just activate his domain expansion, and after you activate your domains, your curse technique is down for a little bit of time. But after Yuki throws Garuda at Kenjaku and Choso goes in at the same time, Kenjaku just activates his gravity technique and mushes them both into the ground. And this is where Yuki begins to break down how Kenjaku's gravity technique works. She says the technique's effective range has a radius of 2 to 3 meters around the sorcerer for 6 seconds. Then he fills the cooldown interval with cursed spirit manipulation. But against me, that won't buy you time. So this is what Yuki's basically saying. For 6 seconds, you just get smushed to the ground against Kenjaku and you're basically helpless. But there's an interval before he can use the technique again, and while he's waiting for it to regenerate, or while he's waiting for the interval to be over with, he just keeps you on the ground with cursed spirits that are heavy. And the reason that this won't work against Yuki is, like we covered earlier, she has Garuda and basically herself, which she can apply infinite mass to, so she can just always punch through a cursed spirit. But this wouldn't be the same for Hakari. If he were to get smushed to the ground, not only would he be stuck there, but he doesn't have a one-shot technique for the cursed spirits that would be holding him down in the interval, and for the entire 6 seconds that Hakari is on the ground, he would just be extremely vulnerable. And there comes a point where Yuki begins to try to pile on attacks against Kenjaku towards the end of the fight, and as she goes to punch him in the face, he just catches her arm, then hits her with a mini Uzumaki to the face, then he hits her with another mini Uzumaki to the stomach that goes straight through her. And after he does this, he uses his gravity technique again, which slams Yuki to the ground and splits her completely in half. Now Yuki does try to use a black hole on Kenjaku. She makes a density so great that it creates a small black hole, but Kenjaku just survives it by using an anti-gravity technique, and he lives. Also, Kenjaku probably has some of the greatest stamina we've ever seen in the series. He goes through an entire fight with Choso, then after that Yuki comes in and she breaks his arms. He uses reverse curse technique to heal his arms, then he opens a domain expansion against Yuki, then he uses his gravity technique some more, and even after that he still uses 2 more mini Uzumakis to finish Yuki off, uses his gravity technique again to split Yuki in half, and then while she's on the ground and summons a black hole, he survives the black hole by using another anti-gravity technique. And at the end of it all, he just brushes his hands and himself off and says woo. And the most impressive thing about it is that he doesn't have like a jackpot that gives him infinite curse energy. He doesn't have a Rika that supplies him with curse energy. The entire time, Kenjaku's just been running off of his own curse energy and stamina, and he's lasted this long. So it is just impressive that he was able to do all of this, use reverse curse technique, open domains, and keep fighting with more techniques, and was still fine. Now there's something really special when it comes to Kenjaku and his domain expansion, and really just his barrier techniques in general. Tengen says that Kenjaku is the second most powerful barrier user in the world behind Tengen himself, which is even further shown when Kenjaku uses his domain against Yuki. When Kenjaku opens up his domain, Tengen says, "This domain is like the one Sukuna showed in Shibuya, expanding a domain and activating his curse technique in an unclosed barrier. It's an amazing feat. The exterior that needs to be dismantled doesn't exist." Because we knew that Tengen and Yuki had this plan that they would get Kenjaku to open up his domain, but after they did that, Tengen would dismantle the outer shell of Kenjaku's domain so that then they could beat him. But Kenjaku doesn't actually have the outer shell to erase, so instead Tengen says, "Treating the edge of the sure hit effects range as the exterior, together with my Senyata barrier, I will erase it." So, not only will Tengen have to do a workaround to try to dismantle Kenjaku's domain, he will also have to get rid of his own Senyata barrier in order to finally get Kenjaku to get out of his domain expansion. Which is insane because not only did they have to team up to just get Kenjaku out of his domain expansion, just one sure hit from Kenjaku was enough to completely mangle Yuki's arm and put her on the ground bleeding out. Now yes, Yuki was able to get back up and use reverse curse technique and heal, but if she was to have gotten hit by more sure hit gravity techniques, she would have just been out of the fight completely. The only reason that she was able to continue fighting was because Kenjaku only had enough time to get out one sure hit before Tengen dismantled his domain expansion. But if he had gotten out multiple sure hits while Yuki was on the ground, just basically tossing her around with gravity sure hits, no doubt she probably would have just died in that moment. And if she wouldn't have died, she would have just been incapacitated completely to the point where she wouldn't be able to fight. Now that I have covered both of the fighting styles and abilities of both fighters, now we can talk about how the fight would actually go as they begin to actually fight. So there's one main way I see this fight going down. I'll also entertain another way after I tell you the first one, but I just want to let it be known what I'm about to say, this first outcome is what I think is most likely going to happen. As we all know, Hakari needs to hit a jackpot by opening his domain expansion. But the problem is, Kenjaku is the second most powerful barrier user in the world, and as we know, domains are barrier techniques, so Kenjaku would just open up his domain, beat Hakari's in a clash, and Hakari would just be screwed from there. Remember how I said Yuki could have just been getting tossed around by gravity sure hits if Tengen didn't come save her? Well, that is basically what would happen to Hakari if Hakari ever tried to open up a domain expansion against Kenjaku. There's just no world in which Kenjaku, who is the second most powerful barrier user in the world, sits there and lets himself be enveloped by Hakari's domain expansion and then just lets Hakari play his game. And after being tossed around by some gravity sure hits, Hakari should just either be dead or out of the fight. Because keep in mind, this would be base Hakari getting mangled. This wouldn't be Jackpot Hakari, as he would actually never get the jackpot off. Jackpot Hakari is the Hakari that's hyped up and has the best feats. As if you remember, Jackpot Hakari was the one that Yuta said was stronger than him, not base Hakari. So this scenario number one, the scenario where Hakari tries to hit a jackpot and then he just gets beat in a domain clash and loses, is the scenario I think is most likely, because it is in character for Hakari to go for a domain expansion at the start of fights against strong opponents, and it is also in character for Kenjaku to open his domain expansion whenever he feels fit. So there's no doubt where this first scenario that Kenjaku and Hakari both open their domain expansions and Hakari loses is the most likely outcome. Now we can also look at a second outcome, and that is where Hakari actually waits to open a domain expansion. He would just be fighting in base to start off, and even then, Hakari would still be at a disadvantage because, like we covered earlier, Hakari doesn't have ranged attacks. He is a up-close brute type of fighter. So Kenjaku would have not only special grade Curse Spirits, but also grade 1 Curse Spirits in a large amount to overwhelm Hakari. And not only that, if Hakari was to ever get too close, Kenjaku also has his gravity technique that would mush Hakari to the ground. So Kenjaku has basically this better offense and range techniques, and he also has better defense and a gravity circle that is around him that would just mush Hakari to the ground. So even if Hakari was to start off in base, he would eventually be forced to open up his domain expansion just to give himself a better chance at winning. And like I said, the moment he does try to open a domain expansion, he loses the fight. So whether in base, whether opening a domain expansion or not, Hakari is just really screwed. There's no way he can get in close and deal a bunch of damage to Kenjaku without either getting taken out by Kenjaku's domain or his gravity technique, because Hakari can only fight up close. Which does suck for Hakari because this is just a really bad matchup. All of the impressive things that we see Hakari do come from his jackpot state. And also, for anybody that is wondering why I didn't bring up the sliding doors that Hakari has, the ones that he uses against Yuji, well, it's just that not only do the doors not seem strong, they have no feats, Yuji's able to react to them and dodge them. Hakari also just doesn't use them against strong opponents. He doesn't use the sliding doors when he fights against Kashimo, so there's no reason that Hakari would use these sliding doors against Kenjaku because they virtually do nothing. So even though I think outcome number 2 is less likely, either way, it leads to an Hakari loss. And with that being said, I want to thank you for reaching the end of the video, and if you enjoyed, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post every couple days on different topics you guys give me and I feel I come up with on my own. Thank you for watching, see you next time.